Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening. Welcome to today's NTIA Pre-NOFO Technical Assistance webinar. Today's topic will be supply chain and workforce development in preparation for IIJA, which will be administered by NTIA. My name is Sarah Blue, and I will be your host and moderator today. Our speakers today will be Maureen Russell and Lucy Moore to talk to you about supply chain and workforce development. Maureen Russell is a senior policy analyst with NTIA's Office of Policy Analysis and Development. Prior to NTIA, Maureen spent over a decade consulting on supply chain and national security policy development, supporting clients at the Departments of State, Homeland Security, and Defense. And she also served as the Director of Business Development and Recruitment at a women-owned small business in Northern Virginia. Hailing from Bowling Green, Ohio, Maureen has a bachelor's degree from St. Mary's College in South Bend, Indiana, as well as a master's degree from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Lucy Moore has joined NTIA's Office of the Assistant Secretary as a Special Policy Advisor focused on workforce development initiatives in January 2022. She most recently served as Associate Staff Secretary in the White House and previously served as a Policy Associate for Middle Class Economics at the Biden Foundation and served at the Department of Labor during the Obama administration. Lucy received her BA from the University of Southern California and a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. This webinar will provide an overview of broadband supply chain and workforce development considerations and introduce suggestions and best practices for states. This webinar will not be about official guidance. The IIJA program requirements and guidance will be included in the upcoming IIJA notices of funding opportunities. There will be one NOFO per program, and we encourage you to review each one carefully, in addition to attending NTIA-led overview sessions. In the future, we will have additional technical assistance, including webinars and other forms of engagement where we can go deeper on both supply chain and workforce development topics. Today, we will focus on broadband supply chain and workforce development, and we will begin by reviewing the broadband supply chain, looking at some of the drivers of anticipated supply chain constraints and considering strategies for easing those constraints. We will follow a similar process for workforce as we review workforce needs in broadband, considering potential challenges and introducing examples of strategies to face those challenges. And now I would like to hand off to my colleague, Maureen.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. So up first today is supply chain. Broadband deployment relies on a complex supply chain involving a variety of materials, infrastructure elements, processes, and actors. On the material side, it takes many different components to connect every American to the internet, including passive infrastructure such as utility poles, active infrastructure like terminals, and then there are other materials like construction machinery. Each of those components have their own logistics and potential bottlenecks. For example, as shown on this slide, you might have a company sourcing the raw glass and chemicals, a manufacturer, a cabler, a distributor, a telecom provider, and a subcontractor, all involved in one process of making and delivering fiber optic cables. Now keep in mind that with complexity like this, you may experience constraints through the supply chain at different times and different components at different speeds. So I just want to take a short detour in our conversation today to address the importance of managing risks posed by cybersecurity threats and how risk mitigation may affect your supply chain. During network planning, deployment, and maintenance, it is important to research and implement risk mitigation strategies to reduce the amount of known supply chain vulnerabilities into your networks. devices, and software throughout your network are already ideal targets for malicious cyber attacks. One way to address this is to make sure you have identified the critical suppliers of your hardware and software involved in the broadband delivery in your state or in your locality, and stay in regular contact with them about their security plans and acquisitions policies. We know this is a big topic, and we're only touching on it so very lightly today during our conversation. So we've listed several resources here on the slide that are great places to start learning more. For small and rural providers especially, I just want to have you consider looking into NTIA's C-Script program, which we've designed to help such providers learn more about supply chain security risks. So back to supply chain. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is a historic investment in our nation, as well as a sizable increase in the scale of federal investment in broadband infrastructure. At the same time, network operators and subscribers are continuing to report strong demand for services, which we all know have heightened during the last 2 years. COVID highlighted the importance of broadband as more people began working and learning from home than ever before. And internet applications like telemedicine and government essential services became even more essential. As programs get underway, it's likely demand for broadband components will increase as well. Given the complexity of the supply chain, the scale of the upcoming deployments, and existing supply chain constraints, we do expect that there are likely to be upcoming supply chain issues. The extent and reason for supply chain constraints will likely vary by material and may evolve over time. Some key broadband components are expected to have high demand, so providers will need to take that into account when planning and deploying. An example of this constraint or these constraints is the current global chip shortage that has been driven by compounding shipping delays, among other issues. Also, more items than ever before contain similar chips, placing sectors like car manufacturers in direct competition with IT hardware producers for the same items and through the same supply chains. Keep in mind that when a shortage causes an unexpected pause to a project mid-construction, that may have ripple effects throughout that whole project. Day-to-day construction workers may seek other employment or other teams if there is an ongoing or unmitigated delay to the current project they're working on. Supply chain challenges aren't new, and there are many people in the industry working to speed manufacturing and delivery of a variety of components. Federal resources are also being dedicated to improving the supply chain in both the long and short term, including the NTIA Department of Defense 5G Challenge. So you may want to keep an eye out for any new ideas or innovations that emerge from such government-sponsored challenges. Simultaneously, there are actions you can take as a state or locality to ease supply chain challenges, including working with regional partners to plan ahead. You can identify policy initiatives that will remove any roadblocks to deployment and discuss asset sharing with your regional neighbors. These initiatives may help improve the overall efficiency of your project, which then, of course, may help you offset any cost increases due to supply chain constraints or delays, and help speed along deployment when components are eventually delivered. That way, delays don't compound. As part of the planning and policies, you may want to consider efforts like supporting regional planning, adopting a dig once policy, and planning for supplier resilience upfront throughout your preparation efforts to help manage all of these issues. Supporting asset sharing by mapping existing infrastructure or making public assets open access can also help projects leverage existing infrastructure and bypass the need to build from scratch. Finally, Aggregate purchasing is a way to pool demand and support subgrantees in submitting orders to suppliers, especially for the smaller providers who may have trouble meeting contract minimums to speed delivery. We've seen demand pooling in other industries too. For example, when a Northeast consortium of states bid for PPE together during the pandemic to increase their buying power. It's relatively novel in broadband, but may be a strategy worth considering depending on the needs and context of your state. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague Lucy to talk about broadband workforce development. Thanks.
I'll start by noting that broadband deployment requires a diverse workforce with unique skills, incorporating design and planning activities, specialized broadband roles, and construction workers, among others. We've included some examples of roles on this slide, but want to note that even these just scratch the surface. There are many additional positions required across the lifetime of a project, and this is only intended to be illustrative. The training, experience, and required skills will vary across these roles, and your state may find that you have the workers needed for one set of positions, while others require more attention. The growing scale of broadband projects due to increased federal investment, including the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, will significantly increase the demand for the telecommunications workforce. As one example, there will need to be an increased number of specialized broadband workers, like fiber technicians, and efforts to train new specialized labor may be complicated by a lack of experienced trainers. We also recognize that all of this is happening while folks continue to return to the workforce following pandemic disruptions and as other infrastructure projects ramp up. Projects that in many cases require similar skill sets as in the case of construction workers. In addition, labor needs may be even higher in rural areas where many unserved and underserved areas are located, and there is lower population density and a smaller labor pool. Given the BEAD program's focus on unserved and underserved households, it may be worthwhile to plan around the particular context of rural deployment, especially acknowledging that broadband projects will continue to have operational and maintenance needs post-construction. In addition to the regional differences in labor needs, workforce constraints and potential solutions are likely to vary by the type of workers needed as well. To give a few examples, in design and planning roles, thoughtful project management may help planners to focus on different projects over time, opening up the potential for a pool of statewide or even regional planners to drive different projects at key moments. Shortages in specialized broadband workers may be combated through re-recruitment efforts of recently retired workers, investing in training programs, or upskilling workers in adjacent roles. Finally, construction workers' skills are often transferable across civil works projects, so consider coordinating with other agencies, offices, or localities during your project planning. In addition to the solutions that I just mentioned, we're going to go a bit more in depth on 3 strategies for easing constraints across the broadband workforce during future deployment. The first is facilitating matching between workers and broadband opportunities. The second is investing in and promoting training programs and apprenticeships. And the last is bolstering your state and local government offices in both size and capabilities. We'll spend the remainder of our presentation diving deeper into each of these. First, let's talk about facilitating matching between workers and opportunities. There's a few ways to do this, but it should always begin by collaborating with stakeholders to assess and anticipate needs. In particular, partner with community members, with nonprofits, and internet service providers to assess needs, anticipate labor gaps, and understand existing workforce programs, and also assess the current roadblocks to meeting labor resourcing needs. Understanding the unique challenges in your community will help you better match workers to broadband opportunities. Once you understand the anticipated needs, work with and alongside organizations and individuals that are already in contact with potential workers, such as your state workforce board, to match workers with opportunities, which may include broadband projects, but also could include workforce development initiatives like training programs. In particular, we recommend focusing on your outreach on unemployed workers, workers who are experienced in telecom, or recently retired workers, and workers with transferable skills in adjacent industries or regions. As one example that we have on the slide here, Louisiana's Broadband Office encouraged applicants of their Gumbo Broadband Grant Program to build workforce development programs as they were undergoing the application process, working to create opportunities to train workers for their specific planned needs. And in addition to kind of nudging workers towards opportunities, we'd also recommend working to raise awareness around broadband career opportunities more broadly and to elevate open roles. So thinking about kind of public campaigns or partnering with employers to improve job quality to get at that piece. The next strategy we'd like to highlight is investing in and promoting training programs and apprenticeships. Here too, we recommend beginning by assessing the training needs of your community and your projects. What type of training will be needed? Are there employers who can help you create career pathways? And how can you develop programs that will expand recruitment efforts to new underrepresented groups? Once you've got a good idea of your needs, invest in supporting training programs that align with your goals. Support may include subsidies for program operations or worker scholarships, or facilitating the matching between training programs, employers, and workers to improve the pipeline. Keep in mind that increasing training capacity will require more trainers. Ask training program operators how you can support the recruitment of training staff or train the trainer programs, including potentially by helping to make trainer positions more attractive for experienced telecom workers or those that have recently retired. Finally, we want to highlight a few training program best practices shown on the slide here. In particular, make sure that you're working alongside employers to create the strongest possible programs and strive to foster inclusive programs by offering wraparound services such as childcare or transportation subsidies. There are many examples of workforce training programs initiated and led by a variety of organizations, including educational institutions, trade associations, unions, and the private sector. Here we highlight 4 examples. I won't talk through all of these today, since the slides will be available to you after our presentation, but wanted to point out that you'll notice many successful programs partner with employers and other organizations to create career pathways for their students, ensuring that they teach applicable skills and connecting students to immediate opportunities for on-the-job learning. Programs also vary in terms of length and focus. Some lead to a specific certification, for example, or require a specific number of experience hours for completion. The variety in models is one of the main reasons that we strongly recommend you talk to your communities, local employers, and local workforce boards, because getting a strong understanding of the specific needs you're anticipating and the timeline for when each type of worker or skill will be needed will help you plan for which types of programs you should be incentivizing or supporting. Finally, bolstering state and local offices can help your broadband projects progress more quickly in the future, and accelerating an overall construction timeline can help you reduce your deployment workforce needs. Permitting, for example, is a time and resource intensive undertaking, often happening in both state and local offices. Improving permitting processes to reduce the overall timeline can significantly speed up a broadband project, which can allow project workers to transition onto other civil works projects. It's important to start working on these strategies today to avoid future bottlenecks, since some activities like data collection will have a long lead time but are highly likely to meaningfully speed up future deployment. Since we've outlined several potential solutions for easing constraints, We also wanted to outline some existing federal programs that may be potential sources of funding or other support. We'll again make this list available as part of the presentation when it's uploaded on our website, and a full list of available grants is accessible on grants.gov. But wanted to note that it may take weaving several funding sources together to fully meet workforce development needs. So we recommend that you start thinking about your approach today. This concludes our formal presentation today, and I'll now turn back to Sarah for the Q&A portion of our conversation.
All right, thank you, Lucy. If Lucy and Maureen can come back on, please. Thank you. Thank you both very much for that. I'd like to begin. We've got a lot of really good questions here. Thank you to everybody who submitted them. Continue to send them into the question and answer feature here on the Zoom. Two questions that I just want to knock out very quickly. Number one, there's a notice of funding opportunity that a lot of people are asking about. And all I can say right now is that by the statute, we are required to have the NOFOs out, the bead and the middle mile by the 16th, and the digital equity June 8th, I believe is the date. That's all I can say for right now. The other question that is very relevant to this conversation about supply chain and workforce development is about the Buy America provision. And being completely transparent, this is the beginning of the conversation. Maureen and Lucy are here to talk about the conversations, the research, what they know about supply chain and workforce development issues. This is, like I said, just the very beginning. There is the Buy America provision. We do not have answers. We're going to have to continue talking. We've been talking to a lot of you, we've done office hours, we've been taking emails, we've done the request for comment. We're taking all of that very seriously. Please continue to to share with us your thoughts on the Buy America provision, because it is very important to us. We do not have answers for you today, and we're sorry about that. But any other question that comes up here, we will do our best to answer. So with that, I am going to begin with Maureen, please. And I wonder if one of the questions that popped up here is what NTIA and the government is doing to support states who are trying to get ahead of the supply chain challenges. Can you talk about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So, trying to get ahead of these issues, and they're 2 years deep, right? So this is a conversation, whether it's semiconductors or Peloton bicycles, right? Like, we've experienced supply chain shortages and delays throughout the pandemic. So how we're going to sort of tackle this, again, like in concert with you all and our colleagues in the private sector, is, we'll bring the right people to the table when we can talk about these specific questions you may have about which particular part of the supply chain. In a perfect world, I would like to see, an interagency approach to this. So we would bring in our colleagues from Department of Homeland Security, who, they're the sector management responsible entity for many of the IT and communications sector companies. So that's how we're looking at it in a macro level. But on a micro level, we do have the NTIA C-Script program, which is geared towards small and rural internet service providers and telecommunications companies. It's a free service. It's information sharing, and it's in concert with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So, it's one way to at least get an email with this information, have access to the resources there. Looking at it section by section, though, recently the Department of Commerce, in consultation with the Department of Homeland Security, published after 1 year of very hard work, and I was on this project team, our official IT or ICTS supply chain assessment. And so you can find that on the Department of Commerce website, but we can also put it in the chat. And it's a very thick review and assessment of the different critical parts of the IT infrastructure and where the bottlenecks are. And at the end, there's some policy recommendations that the U.S. government as a whole is going to consider as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. All right, Lucy, let's talk a little bit about workforce development. One of the questions that we have here is how nonprofits and community organizations can get involved in supporting workforce development in their states.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate the question. Connecting with your state and local officials would be a great first step to understand the efforts that are already underway in your community and how you might be able to plug in. We also would suggest that depending on your particular nonprofit or organization's expertise, would recommend connecting with other stakeholders, such as those that work on workforce development or community organizations or educational institutions to support workforce development that links workers to apprenticeships, internships, or jobs. And so I think there's a number of different roles that organizations can play, whether that is helping to kind of identify and recruit workers or amplify messages about job availability. One of the things that we've been hearing from a lot of folks is that, high school students and even younger don't know that these careers exist and that there are kind of good jobs with career pathways in the telecommunications space. And so I think amplification and awareness of that is one piece, as well as kind of actually working on workforce development programs and supporting those initiatives. So I think the answer is there's a range of options depending on what type of organization you are and how you can plug into your individual community.
Thank you, Lucy. Excuse me, a few minutes ago, I mentioned this is answering Kathleen's question here about the NOFO dates. And I just want to point out that today, all I can tell you is that the statute makes it so that we have to have the NOFOs posted for both BEAD and middle mile Monday, May 16th, and digital equity by June 8th. So I hope that you got that. And then there was another question that popped up, really a simple one that I can answer, which is if there will be more webinars after the NOFO for BEAD. And I can promise you that you are going to be tired of seeing our faces. We are going to be doing many, many webinars for BEAD, for digital equity, for middle mile, we'll be doing consultations. It's very important to us to make sure that everybody understands the NOFOs, how to apply, who's eligible. So yes, there will be many, many, many more webinars. So thank you for asking about that. And I am going to hop back over to Maureen. These questions are just really coming in very quickly, so I apologize if I'm not getting to you right away. Maureen, the question is if you have any official research based on supply chain issues and or inflation changes that will impact equipment, supplies, or labor costs. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Of course, thank you. So part of that answer is in that very thick Department of Commerce supply chain assessment that I just posted into the chat. It is also available on the Department of Commerce website. So there's some Googling there, but it basically, it says that, because of COVID and just other changes in the market, there is more production overseas, and we all know that. And, the supply chain bottlenecks reduce supply, increase costs. Supply, I wish I could just hear my economics professor yelling at me right now for not being more articulate on this, but it is, it is interconnected here. So when we see more production, we'll see prices go down. So there is that research within that Department of Commerce website or in that report. And then also there are some market-based products sponsored by whether like Market Watch or S&P that have done official forecasts on, the shortages causing overall inflation for those countries with high demand for the products. So that's where we're seeing it. And please again reference the department report. There's another research link I can post, but it is included as a source in the assessment that I posted in the chat. So that's where we're kind of at. And I think it's definitely, as a whole, you want to see this, these supply chain bottlenecks, end. So our state and local entities can afford the right products that are, secure and are trusted vendors. And we're not waiting and having to resort to low cost options. So low cost, low trust options, I will say that, in order to make things happen. So there's hope with other programs within the Department of Commerce that they're working with domestic producers to have more production here in the United States, but we're also working with our allies and partners overseas to increase the speed of production and make sure that everyone has the right products at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And there's another question that popped up here that given all of these supply chain issues and labor issues and shipping all happening at one time, if we expect any of the federal timelines for completion to be relaxed in order to provide relief. And all I can say on that right now is there will be more details about timelines in the upcoming notices of funding opportunities. So I would encourage you, our website is the Broadband USA website. There will be a lot of news posted there. So please keep an eye on that. Like I said, the notices of funding will be posted pretty quickly. So please read that and as soon as it comes out. So thank you for that question. Lucy, I have a question here about the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program, which is called TIRAP. And the question is whether there's any applicability in applying training as a part of that. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. So the Tiewrap program is another workforce development program that we certainly encourage states and other community organizations to take a look at. The kind of examples that we had on the slide were just to show you a range of different examples from different types of, led by different types of organizations. But certainly there are many others out there, and including that industry registered apprenticeship program. And in particular, registered apprenticeships are a great way of creating career pathways, folks who are entering into the industry, and also working closely with employers to ensure that the skills those students are getting will be extremely applicable to the roles that they're looking to fill. So yes, that is another program that we would recommend looking at. I think the key on kind of the workforce development programs that of the examples we've shown is that it will really depend on the need in your given state, in your given community, what type of model works best.
Little Thank you. Yeah, it really does depend on your state, your community, your territory, wherever you are located. It's all a little bit different. Maureen, there's a question here. I'm going to go back and forth so that you can expect who's coming up next. Maureen, there's a question about supply chain. And the question is, with both rising inflation and supply chain challenges, how could an applicant, or what is NTIA doing to keep costs reasonable? Do you mind spending a little bit of time talking about that?
Yes, of course. Thanks so much for that question. It's an important one, right? So, we keep saying as a government, as NTIA, that there are these challenges. Things are happening. We hope to see the challenges abate soon. Within our work at NTIA, we are shaping the policies every day, whether it's on foreign investment issues or working with the regulatory bureaus and offices in the government to make sure that realistic policies are developed. So that's what my office, the Office of Policy Analysis and Development, does all the time. And so within this framework, within broadband, we're looking at making sure we're in coordination with our interagency brethren to limit or to reduce bottlenecks, to bring the small business or the new business perspective into these conversations. So you're not expected as a small business provider or a small business service provider or a smaller state's broadband office, you're not going to be expected to have the same maturity, or you're not going to be, we're not going to try to compare you to like a multinational corporation. I guess that's the fastest way to say that. So also within, to make sure that things are fair, we also have law enforcement capabilities within the government, not at NTIA, but the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Justice are always, our allies in preventing, price gouging schemes and issues to that extent. So I think, as much as we can be made aware of those things, we can be your advocate in other forum. So whether it's Customs and Border Protection, their Office of Trade Policy, or our friends the FTC, or even within the FCC, we're able to have those discussions. So that's what we're trying to do. Part of the reason this money is going in through the states is, so they have a more micro level picture of what is actually needed. So, we're always here to listen to state broadband office concerns as well. So that's how we'll move forward. And then in the future, any possible outreach, we'll make sure that we, bring supply chain concerns up again and again. As Sarah said, at some point you'll be tired of listening. And hopefully that means we've solved the issue and it's just a routine matter. But until then, we will continue to hear your concerns, take them to the appropriate parts of the US federal government, and hopefully resolve them in a way that's helpful for everyone.
Thank you, Maureen. And that actually answered a couple of other questions that we had here. If we were going to do upcoming if we would offer technical assistance on supply chain and workforce development. And the answer, we'll be doing technical assistance, we'll be doing webinars. This is a crucial part of all of these NOFOs that are coming out. I'll also point out there have been a couple of questions about what would probably be best answered when the NOFOs are published. For example, if there's a pathway for the state to use some of the 100 million to purchase broadband equipment. And I would just say, please be patient. I'll repeat, right now, all I can say is Monday, the 16th is when BEAD is by statute supposed to come out. But I think that when you read the NOFO, you'll have some answers to that. And we will also have webinars to explain things a little bit further. Another question that came up very early in this conversation was about the broadband maps being updated and published. And I imagine that is probably the person who asked was wondering about the FCC location maps, when those would be updated. And my understanding is that the FCC maps are supposed to be ready by the end of the year. So that's as much as we know. And of course, a lot of the BEAD actual allocations in that formula depends on, we at NTIA are by statute relying on the FCC maps for that. So we're talking about the end of the year with that. So Lucy, I'm going to switch gears and come back over to you. I'm so sorry, there are just a lot of questions here. Lucy, the question here is about using BEAD funds, and if BEAD, B-E-A-D, if those can be used for workforce development. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. So I will again repeat Sarah's drumbeat that outside of what's in the statute, we can't yet comment on what will be in the notice of funding that again is statutorily required by Monday. But I will say that the statute itself states that BEAD funds may be used for training for employees of the broadband program or office of an eligible entity, state or territory, or employees of a political subdivision related to staffing and capacity or consulting or contracted support. So that may be an opportunity to staff up and improve processes in the broadband office related to avoiding future bottlenecks, which we discussed in the presentation. But again, the kind of beyond that, the eligible uses of the funds, the answer is stay tuned for the official notice to come out.
Thank you, Lucy. And there's a question that just popped up. If that Tiewrap, I think that's how you pronounced it. What does that stand for again, please?
Yes, it is the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Maureen, this next question I think is an excellent question. There were 1,000 people registered for this webinar to talk about supply chain. We've got a lot of people still on with us. And so that means that it's a very diverse audience of large providers, states, political subdivisions, small providers, everybody, nonprofits, a whole bunch of different people. And so the question is this, quite frankly, don't supply chain challenges favor some of the bigger providers and leave the smaller providers out?
That is a challenging question. Thank you, Sarah.
Sorry. I promised I wouldn't be too hard, but I think this is a really relevant question.
I agree. And, the point, the spirit of IIJA, right, is jobs in America, investing in the infrastructure, making sure that, a small business, medium-sized business, a nonprofit, academic institution, they all have a fair chance to invest in the United States as a whole. So, traditionally, yes, that there have been programs that, just because the US government is also a contracting entity, right? So we're used to dealing with large contracts. So I think it does make it may seem geared towards larger companies with more sophisticated corporate teams that can lobby or at least turn on a dime on any opportunity. But I just want to remind everyone that also within IIJA, and hopefully you'll see this as the forthcoming NOFOs come out too, is that we are keeping things technology neutral to the extent that there's the discussion about Buy America, Build America, which we're still working on our own interpretation, as Sarah said, and in the technologies that are specifically banned by the Federal Communications Commission. So aside from all of that, we are trying and we are going to keep things as technology neutral as possible and provider neutral. And we're working, this money is working through the states. So the private sector can meet with your state broadband office and come up with a solution that makes the most sense for everyone. That way, every size, shape, location, service provider or vendor or organization can at least stay at the state level, and you don't have to come to the behemoth of the federal government. So we do have that going forward, and that should be more helpful and have a more efficient and effective feedback loop for everyone. But I mean, It's also helpful for everyone maybe to like work to, like find regional partners and maybe work in teams on these projects as well. Planning as I'm from Ohio originally, so Northwest Ohio, planning Central Ohio, things like that. Like try to work with your allies and partners stateside, and then figure out who has the best contacts at the broadband office and work from there. I think that's where everyone will see more gains is working together as teams. But it is, again, a state by state or locality by locality solution. And so I encourage everyone to be creative and, and share information as appropriate, and then go forward and see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Yeah, I'll just reiterate. I mean, the goal is to bring affordable, high-speed internet to every American, and that is not going to happen unless we are all working together. This will be states and local and churches and community organizations and schools, community anchor institutions. This is going to be large incumbents and co-ops, and the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we all work together. So there's no shoving of elbows at the table or anything like this. This is really everybody coming together. Thank you, Maureen. Lucy, kind of on that note, the question is what's the best way for states to work with providers and subgrantees to develop the workforce?
Sure. So again, not to be super repetitive of myself, but I think that it's really important to get clarity early on of the kind of provider and private sector workforce needs. And so kind of asking your local internet service provider, no matter what kind of entity that is, do they anticipate having more challenges finding broadband technicians or construction laborers? Are there seasonal patterns that they expect related to their workforce development needs? Those kinds of things, I think, is really important to get a on the ground understanding of the challenges that your state will face related to workforce development. And then I think working with those internet service providers to understand their interest and ability in supporting workforce development plans, because, in the end, this is to the benefit of all of us to have a highly skilled, diverse workforce ready to go in terms of deploying these programs. And so understand if they can, make internships or apprenticeships available. Will they provide financial support for programs like that, or provide trainers from their own workforce or recently retired folks from their workforce? And kind of also important to work with them on developing curriculum for workforce development programs, because it is really important that these programs actually lead into jobs and teach the skills that workers will need to do those jobs. So that makes the program stronger. It also ensures that the participants have better outcomes in terms of their job future and the skills needed for that job.
Thank you, Lucy. One of the great things about being the host or moderator is that I get to pick which really easy questions I will answer. And so I'm gonna call on one of those. And there have been a few questions very seriously about where this information, like all of the material that we're posting today, where the transcripts, where the recording of this conversation on supply chain workforce development will be posted. And we have, if you go to our website, which is broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov. Again, that's broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov, and go to events and past events. There you will see, for example, right now when I look at it, I see the Pre-NOFO Technical Assistance Webinar number 4, which was completed on April 27th. So we endeavor to always post the transcript, the recording, and the deck to that website under past events within a week of the event. So to answer the question, by next week on Wednesday, you will have all of this material available to you. So with that, I'm going to pop back over to, and there's a good clarification. I think that, Maureen, I just said Buy America. And can you please clarify the BABA acronym for us?
Yeah, so I feel Buy America has been around for a while. There's also Fly America, where US government employees can only fly on American airlines overseas. So then there is also Buy America, Build America. So that's what we're talking about. And we've shortened it for ease of use to Buy America, but in the documentation, it would be BABA, which is BABA, which could be fun to say, but we do say Buy America instead.
Thank you, Maureen. All right. How about if I can ask you another question, Maureen, is you talked about suppliers and keeping in mind security of products. And I wondered if you could spend a few minutes, please, talking about why not just choose the lowest cost equipment? You alluded to that a little bit earlier. Can you go a little bit further in detail on that thought, please?
So it's a very long explanation, but NTIA has been supporting vendor diversity for the last few years now, and it's our priority to allow more vendors making hardware, even software and software as a, and services, software as a service and services, allowing that, so you don't always have to only buy from one particular company that's located overseas. And so, there's a lot of national security issues here. There's also the quality of the equipment, whether or not it can last for as long as your network is built to last. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying we want trusted vendors, and it has to have, that adhere to the FCC's limitations as well. So the FCC has a lot more information about what equipment can and cannot be used on US telecommunication systems. And we can link that site in the chat for you. But it's it's basically to prevent any known, unknown, and future vulnerabilities into your network through hardware or through software produced in our adversarial countries. So it's challenging because it does add price to the conversation, but we are working, as I said before, with our partners and allies overseas, as well as there are various people in the United States, whether federal government or state and local, bringing these manufacturers to the United States to adhere to our regulations. So you will have more, you can have more faith or some more trust in that process and making sure that you're not the next victim of a cyber issue. It's just one of many ways to include security in your planning. Having trusted equipment from trusted vendors, whether updating and patching, making sure that's easy to do with these vendors. It's all part, like this continuum of security, so you don't have to deal with the costly effects of a cyber breach or a cybersecurity incident overall.
Thank you, Maureen. And kind of along those lines, not really directly related to cybersecurity or low cost equipment, but thinking about this is not just the federal government putting down some heavy-handed decision. I was thinking about, we did announce that we are doing our best to hire federal program officers in each state. And the reason for that is to bridge the gap. I'm not saying that the federal program officer who's hired for each state or territory is going to be an expert in low cost equipment or what safe equipment to buy is, but that is to bridge the gap, because we want to make sure we're doing our best to reach out and hear from all of you what you're running into. It's been incredibly helpful to I've talked to many organizations, trade associations, companies, part providers, hearing about, things like bolts, for example, that were not being, you didn't actually forecast how many bolts you were going to need on a job site. And now you do, because if you're short 5 bolts and your crew's there, they're going to go down the road to the next place where they can actually work on something. This is a big problem. And so we're going to be working with you. We're going to have our teams extended into the field to be working with you. This is, I know that we keep talking about this being a collaboration of everybody, but it really is the only way that we're going to get high-speed, affordable internet to all Americans is by everybody rolling up their sleeves together.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more to that, I mean, the cost of cyber incidents, I mean, it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, depending on the type of incident. So, or even, say there was a tornado or a hurricane or massive snowstorm, right? Like if your equipment isn't up to the standards, in this standards and the FCC rules and regs, right? Like it could easily just give out on you, and you could end up with half of your city or your counties being disconnected from the internet, which we know disrupts schooling, which disrupts telehealth, which, it disrupts so much, as we've already seen in the last 2 years. So just to build on that, it is, in the long term, it's hard to measure and put a specific price on cybersecurity. If we could do that, we would run away and be our own company to do that. But, it is in the, future planning prevents poor performance. So let's just, if you think about it that way and work together and share the right kinds of information and get the right kinds of equipment, you'll avoid being shut down for weeks on end, trying to figure out what happened to your internal operating systems and things like that.
Maureen, there are a couple of questions that are headed your way about cybersecurity, but I'll give you a chance to take a breather. But if you want to continue thinking about that, I'll come back to you. Lucy, I'm going to pop over to you really quickly and ask if you have any suggestions about government websites that might provide good resources on broadband training programs, where people could get the workforce training.
Sure. So if you are a state broadband leader, our first kind of advice would be to make sure that you're connected into the state broadband leaders network. That is the peer-to-peer knowledge sharing platform. And there very likely is resources through that channel that could be helpful. I also would say, in addition to kind of NTIA websites and the Broadband USA website that we just discussed, we would recommend looking at websites or at the Department of Labor, our colleagues there, both the ETA and WIOA resources available from the Department of Labor. And I would also say that like the private sector and nonprofit sectors also have many resources and workforce development best practices available. So if you need any help finding specific preferences or getting connected, please feel free to reach back to us as well, because we want to be helpful where we can in connecting folks with resources.
Thank you, Lucy. I see that, Maureen, you've also been providing some tips there in the chat. And so I hope that that's been helpful. There are some questions here about the other programs like CMC, and we can't really comment today on any of the particular programs. Do you want to make sure that you understand we're not trying to avoid your question? We are not the program team for CMC, so we can't talk to that today. Maureen, I'm going to pop back over to you, thinking about the cybersecurity and what resources or technical assistance will NTIA offer to help states get cybersecurity right during their supply chain sourcing?
So I think, we end up saying this a lot today, but it is, there's more to come. As when the NOFOs are published and we are able to provide more information about future technical assistance. But like I said before, whether it's supply chain sourcing or supply chain security, those are issues that we've encountered through the office hours sessions and through other outreach and my other day job responsibilities. So we'll likely have that on a hypothetical list of things to do. But there are other places to look. There is the CISA, the DHS Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Administration, CISA.gov. And they have tons of resources for small, medium, large entities, businesses, nonprofits, academic, what have you, as well as state and local outreach. And so that's in my background, is state and local outreach through the Department of Homeland Security. So they are a great resource to start with, and then see how to, if there are other points of contact within the Department of Homeland Security to reach out to. And if you have questions about that, we'll try to be a good neighbor and introduce where we can. There's the Cyber Shield program, our website that was put up in recent months because of the geopolitical tensions in Eastern Europe. So, there's a lot of information posted there. And, also looking at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Cyber and Supply Chain Security Center of Excellence. And that's linked on our slide too, when those are published. So there's a lot of things to read, and there's future technical assistance perhaps to come. And we really do encourage everyone to join C-Script if it's appropriate for you, and work with your state and local government offices, broadband offices, and share those security issues with each other. For a few years, I worked at a Department of State program that shared information with US entities that had their operations overseas, called the Overseas Security Advisory Council. And that was our number one point of advice back then. Share that information with your neighbors, your neighboring companies, your partners in future projects, and then share that with your local government officials, and then they can help work with you. That's it takes some time. It takes trust, and it's not overnight, but it is essentially a lower cost option to securing your network, is working together and sharing that information going forward.
Thank you, Maureen. So I'm going to take a little detour from the questions for just a second. And there are a lot of websites that both Lucy and Maureen have mentioned that might be helpful resources for you. And they're not all on our own website. And we've received a lot of requests to please post those websites. So what I'd like to do now, this is not ideal, but I'm wondering, for anybody who might be reading the transcript in a week, if they want to pop over to this part of the video, an hour and 5 minutes into this webinar, I'd like to kind of rattle through verbally some of these website tools that we've been talking about. I'll begin because I didn't give Lucy or Maureen a heads up on this. So I'll begin with the easy one, which is if you would like to come back and look at this deck, watch the webinar, or read the transcript, which I I personally have done many, many times. It's very helpful. If you want to go to our website, which is broadbandusa let me double check, because now that I say that, I'm probably going to make a mistake. broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov, like government. And over on the banner on the top, you'll see events all the way on the right side. If you drop down to events, there's past events. And a week from now, you will see all of this material. We keep everything here, all of these webinars that we've been doing, everything that I've been a part of for the last year goes here. So please come check this out. You'll find the transcript, the webinar, and the deck that we've been talking about. Again, that's broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov, and then events and past events. Maureen, are there a couple of, if you could just provide a cheat sheet verbally of other places that you would point people to for helpful resources as they think about supply chain, cybersecurity, C-script, all that stuff, where would you send people to?
First, there's ntia.gov. Within that website, there's usually a menu bar on the side that says cybersecurity. So you can start there, and that's where you'll find more information about C-script. I also put that in the chat at some point, but I think that's gotten awfully unwieldy there. So, so please search through that. It'll be on the slides when we're there, when they are published eventually too. So I would start there. And then again, I would say to seek out that, there's some clarifying posts here too about the FCC covered list too. But also to look at that and just note that if that's one sector of the communication system, it's likely appropriate for other parts too. So just to keep those things in mind, and I understand that it's meant for one particular part of FCC. We also look at www.cisa.gov, shields up, so shields-up. And so that was the website I referenced a little bit ago that was created to share cybersecurity information concerning the events that are going on in Eastern Europe. We're all, as a country, need to make sure that, we know about our cybersecurity practices as individuals, to make sure that we're not the weak point to allow a foreign adversary unintentional access to our networks. So those are three places with the FCC covered list. Continue to seek out through Broadband USA. Too, we'll point those, whatever future engagement there will, have those events going forward. I'd also say look at your local PTACs, which are mostly for federal contracting organizations, but they often have, I'll find that acronym and spell that out for you. They often have cybersecurity seminars for small and medium-sized businesses as well. There are very stringent and heavy, perhaps lists pages long of cybersecurity requirements for federal contracting. And we don't expect that to be one-for-one applicable here, but they're an excellent opportunity to get some free training where you can through associated universities and colleges. So that acronym is the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. That is what PTAC stands for. And for example, there's one here in Northern Virginia through George Mason University. When I was working in business development with the woman-owned small business I was employed at before, I often sought their help because it was free and comprehensive too. So that's where I would start. We can put a link to the national PTAC site there. But we do have other, the NTIA.gov is step one. But if you're seeking out a more thorough or thought-provoking research activity, steps 2 through 3 are those other sites I listed.
So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Lucy, are there any sites that you want to mention?
I did link to two Department of Labor websites. One is the Employment and Training Administration, ETA. Their website is www.dol.gov/agencies/ETA. And then within that, you can get to the WIOA, WIOA resources as well. So for kind of federal both funding and just technical assistance resources related to training and workforce development, I would recommend those Department of Labor resources.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go back to the questioning. I just think it's important. Sometimes we throw around tools that we use that become second nature here, and want to make sure that you've got those available to you as well. So thank you, Maureen and Lucy, for taking the time to do that. Lucy, there's a question here. How do we think that broadband workforce development initiatives will impact other labor initiatives or workforce needs? Can you spend some time talking about that, please?
Sure. So thanks for the question. I think that the kind of multiple infrastructure programs and their competing or complementary workforce needs is something that we're very aware of and have been thinking about. It is likely, I think, as we mentioned in our presentation, that some of the skill sets and expertise workers will be in demand across the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act programs. So we at NTIA have responsibility over the broadband programs, but the kind of Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, other federal agencies have their own infrastructure programs that will also require workers to deploy. And so I think the recommendation we would have there is to not think through any workforce development solutions in a silo. In order to succeed in implementing these programs, we'll need to have a holistic approach and be coordinated across, and sometimes this will be different state or local departments working together. There's a department the State Department of Transportation. Are they well synced with their state workforce board and with the broadband office? And so making sure that those connections are made so that these solutions aren't sought out in a silo, and also coordinating different civil works projects across your state and community to find solutions that will work for multiple programs.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm going through a lot of the questions. There are many here that are probably going to be more answerable as soon as we get the notice of funding opportunities out. There's a question here about specifically for middle and last mile builds, what sort of considerations should a state keep in mind about pre-ordering supplies? And if two different agencies are building out, should they coordinate purchases? The NOFO by statute, what I can tell you today, May 11th, is that by statute, we are required to have the BEAD NOFO out on Monday, the 16th. So that's all I can say right now. I would also say that coordinating between different agencies is really going to depend on the rules that are in the, one agency might allow you to use funds from a program, others might not. So you really have to read the notice of funding opportunities. I know that it sounds, I'm beating a dead horse saying that over and over. It's not fun. It does take a lot of time reading a notice of funding opportunity because it is really long. The statute was really long. But we did our best to try to organize that. But please believe me when I say we've been spending a lot of time with the policy team, writing these rules, trying to put it together in a way that makes sense and is usable for a normal person. And additionally, we have lots of technical assistance planned. We've got the federal program officers that we're bringing people on board right now to represent every state and territory. This is really important to us to make sure that everybody understands. Everybody has to understand. I'm going to say it again. Bringing affordable, high-speed internet to every American. All of us have to understand how we do this. And so by statute, Monday the 16th. That's all I can say right now. Maureen, I think, and Lucy, I think that we'll give it a few more minutes, but I do think that the rest of the questions that are popping up have to do with the NOFOs. As you think about that, like we said, this is the beginning of a conversation. We've been talking to a lot of you. We want to continue hearing from you. We realize there is a supply chain. There are supply chain concerns. We're going to have to get creative in technologies, in who we buy from, how we buy. There's a shortage of workers. There's a lot of people in demand to build broadband, to build bridges, to dig tunnels, to build cars. These are real problems, and we want to hear from you. So this is the beginning of the conversation. We will continue to do these kinds of webinars. Is Maureen or Russell? I'm so sorry. Maureen or Lucy. Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that you think that you haven't talked about specific to supply chain or workforce that you want to make sure people understand?
I guess to start with supply, it's going to be frustrating, and I think we're all in different size and shaped boats, but boats nonetheless, right? So when it comes to getting the right equipment, getting that on time, making sure that it meets plans and the specifics and whatever requirements through your state and localities and anything from the federal government, that these things do take time and years. And, we at NTIA continue to make sure that realistic expectations are in the forefront of our conversations. Nothing is being flipped on like a switch overnight. So we do understand that, over, the next month, over the next few years, that we're all going to be working here together on these issues. There are ongoing programs through NTIA looking into vendor diversity and 5G wireless standards and security. We are hopeful for future appropriations on innovation in 5G and 6G. So stay tuned, please, for other programming through NTIA on things such as open access networks and wireless networks and technologies. And then there are our colleagues in other bureaus and the Department of Commerce that are working night and day on other types of grants and programs to make sure that our population is cyber ready, as well as our colleagues in the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, and Department of Defense. So we're all trying, as a federal government, which we all know is never easy, to work on these issues and to alleviate these supply chain challenges and associated risks and other considerations. But please be patient with us. You can't do a sharp pivot in a cruise ship. So we're trying as much as we can. So please just keep sharing information with your state officials, with each other, planning together, and then of course asking us questions when you can. So we do appreciate that, but please, it's gonna work. So we all have to work on it together for it to happen. So thank you so much for today.
I think in terms of workforce development, the one thing that I would add, we talked a lot about the constraints and challenges that we are likely to face, and those are real. And so we want to be partners in thinking through solutions. But I also just want to note that we think that there's a real opportunity here. And, we're going to be creating thousands of jobs that have a real opportunity to improve people's lives. And it's something, making sure that we're creating good jobs is something that is very important to us at NTIA. It's very important to the Secretary, Secretary Raimondo. And so, we talk a lot about these solutions as filling a desperately needed gap, but it also, I just wanted to note that it also is really important in terms of economic opportunity and mobility, and creating pathways for folks in this industry. So thank you for your time and for caring about these issues.
Thank you, Lucy. And there's one last question about what if there's a typical time of day that the NOFOs are typically released. And all I can tell you right now is before 8 o'clock on the 16th, for sure, the notice of funding opportunities will be available to you. Thank you very much for taking your time this afternoon or this morning or night to join us. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions. This was a good conversation. From the bottom of my heart, let us know what else we want to continue talking about this with supply chain and workforce development. This is a tremendous opportunity, but we do need to continue talking. So let's keep doing that and watch for our NOFOs to come out and watch for more webinars for technical assistance, talking about the NOFOs, the rules and all that stuff. And have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.